Your first food memory, this is a beautiful one. This is your mother and daughter, so 2 generations, you're wedged in the middle, and they do this thing called baking together.
Yeah.
Describe the scene.
Well, my mum's a great cook, and so my daughter spent a lot of time with my mum. I mean, my mum is, I would have to say, the most successful person I've ever met. And she's really happy. She's really healthy. She has great relationships with, a variety of different age groups. She is involved in her community. She's the president of the Florina Aristoteles Club, the female club, and which I tried to talk her out of. I said that those things never end well. You end up losing a lot of friends doing this community work, because the fallout had been pretty enormous for a lot of people that she knew that had been involved. Like Greeks running their own show. You get a lot of Greeks involved in the one thing and it's chaos, right? Certainly when that's the main thing that they've got left to focus on. But it's worked out really well for her. She's got a lot of my peers as besties of hers. She lives a street away from my brother's brilliant cafe in Melbourne, and that she helped establish by accident. She was really depending on the rent coming from this milk bar back then in Richmond. Because my dad died when she was pretty young. She was only 47, 48 when my dad died. So she was widowed at a very young age. So she really was dependent on that rent. And then the guy who was renting the milk bar from her stopped paying his rent. So she came up with the brilliant idea that she should go in and try resuscitate it and then get somebody else in there to run it. Well, what happened was people loved her in the community so much, and it went from a milk bar that my brother art directed into this gorgeous place. And then she started cooking breakfast for herself, and tradesmen would come in and go, that smells nice. Oh, yes, I'm making myself an omelette. Oh, can you make me one? Yeah, okay. Suddenly we're cooking food now. And it became this hugely successful, pulsating community thing in the Richmond area, and it's right next to the MCG. So we got a lot of the Richmond football team and the Melbourne Storm that would come in there and buy their stuff, and it expanded, and now it's this fully fledged, brilliant cafe called Rowena Corner Store. It's the only shop on a residential street, and people absolutely adore it. And it got bigger than my mum eventually, so now it's got like 12 staff at every shift, and my mother goes there and has her coffee and her orange juice every morning and walks around like sort of Al Pacino and this short little powerful figure, and knows everybody and kisses babies and has watched children grow up through that shop, and is so happy with her life and her independence and her capacities and her heart, and she's very content.
So the baking.
Yeah. Well, this is how the baking started. So they used to bake a lot when Jamie was little. And then my mother decided to start baking and for the shop as a business with Jamie, my daughter, who's now 12. And so from when they were little, they would make little Greek, sweets and sell them to the shop as a business. It's a weird partnership, that one, because my mother does all the work, pays for the ingredients, and my daughter gets all the profits. So I don't know how that works. And so then that got my daughter really addicted to baking. And so the two of them from a very young age, from when my daughter was little, and I used to get her one of those really high chef's hats, which look so cute, and she would stand on a box, and while my mother would teach her how to make these little sweet things, because they're both so sweet together. They've got such a great relationship. My daughter always says, "Mama, don't be upset, but I love Yaya Boo the most." And I'm like, that makes me really happy. My daughter started baking for a friend of mine who's got a great place in Neutral Bay, and she makes cakes for her, and now she's going to start making cakes for the cafe next door. It's brought out a real entrepreneurial spirit. Meanwhile, the business in Melbourne is run still by my mother very happily. "I've got some dosh for you. Oh, yeah, don't you worry. We're the rich, I tell you, rich."
Your second food memory is the men barbecuing at Easter.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say barbecuing. I would say putting a lamb on the spit and manually turning that thing for hours and hours every Greek Easter.
So the men of your tribe would do it manually. They didn't have the motorized.
Well, back then it wasn't in existence. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was a wheel from a bike with something attached, and they would turn it, and that would turn the lamb, like a spit, obviously, round and round, and they didn't mind. We had an uncle, my dad's sister's husband, who was a real foodie. He loved food, and everything was about food. And my father would despair because he'd want to have a conversation about something important, and he couldn't. He'd say, Yanni, his name was. He would say, Yanni, what do you think about what's happening politically? Oh, in Greek, he'd say, oh, they're all, you can't trust anyone, and they're just trying to make money out of us. That would be the length of that conversation. What did you think about what's happening, with the soccer team? Oh, what? They're winning one minute, they're losing the next. I'm not bothered with that sort of stuff. He'd try to talk to him about philosophy. What do you want me to say? Life's tough. That's it. Okay. And then he'd say, watch this. Yanni, what did you eat today? Well, then we'd get a 20-minute monologue about Yanni and what he'd prepare and how he'd had kidneys with a passata sauce with onions and garlic in the morning with a bottle of beer. And that's the exact opposite of how my dad ate, because my dad was a heart patient, so he wasn't eating that for breakfast. But Yanni would launch into a 20-minute monologue about the ingredients and how delicious it was. So he was sort of our food guy. And Yanni, all you had to do with Yanni every Easter was set him up with a little table with meze on it and some, tsipuro, which is our version of grappa. And Yanni would be happily turning that wheel for hours on end. And do you remember they would put the lemon?
Yes.
With a fork, and they would dip it in olive oil, salt, pepper, and oregano, and they would continuously dab that lamb on the skin so that it would dry up and be crunchy and moisten it and give it flavor. And that was what Yanni would do. So all the men would sit around and chat, and Yanni would be turning that wheel, and the women would be preparing, the other food inside. And it was often at our house, and I would be setting tables, and the music would be on, and the smoke, would be the delicious smell of it would just, be the smell of the neighborhood.
Your third food memory, with Christmas around the corner.
Yep.
Not everyone has a fantastic Christmas. But your third food memory is based around the 7th Christmas after your father died.
Yeah.
Fell apart. Wheels fell off.
Wheels fell off. Wow, it was really hard. It was very, very hard. Look, when someone dies, you get all the attention. Everyone's there. And in the Greek culture, literally your home is physically open for people to come to and help and mourn with you and show their support for 40 days. The Greek coffees getting made, the little scotches, we know how to do that, and we do it really well. We don't run away from death. We run towards it, and we show our support because we know it's going to happen to us, and we know that that's what we would want. So people that are close to you, whether that's friends or relatives or community members, flood the house. So you get all of that. And then the first, second, third Christmas, well, you're in deep grief, so of course it's going to be different. By the 7th, it's not a novel thing anymore. It's not this, you've been forgotten about. And you've to use a term that's been used a lot since the pandemic, it becomes your new normal to watch what used to be very festive events like Christmas Day or Easter, where it's filled with people. And then suddenly it's down to the three of you, my mother, my brother, and me. Or in this particular case, on the 7th, my mother and I went to the cemetery in the morning on Christmas Day, lovely. Other people are opening their presents under a tree or,
it's kind of
raiding
that
the
Greek
stockings.
Torture. We do that to ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, I get it. She wanted to do that. That was important for her, and I went. And then my brother, because we owned a bar / nightclub for many, many years. And the night before, I think we must have been open. And so my brother came out late morning from his bedroom and said, I'm going to Amanda's for lunch. That was his then girlfriend. After having been to the cemetery, after having had Christmases that were now down to 3, suddenly it was 2, me and my mum. And I just went, this is the worst feeling in the world, you know. Christmas is tough anyway. And when you feel like you're completely alone with it and things aren't the way they're supposed to be, I just made a decision in that moment. I just thought, I'm not repeating this one ever again. I've got to change what Christmas can be because this is not working.
Did you have to reframe your grief, do you think?
My mum is fantastic. My mum is so not a burden. Christmas means nothing to me. I watch the carols by candlelight. I had a good time. I watched the Christmas movies. Nothing to me. So I said, who do I love that would be feeling like I'm feeling today? And that was my besties that had either lost a parent or never had a parent or have fractured relationships with their own family or are physically in another part of the world or another part of the country. So I just said, right, from now on, we're doing Orphans Christmas. Let's redefine it. Let's run with the chosen family. My brother jumped on board. Yep, okay, let's do that. Reached out to all my friends. And from the 8th Christmas onwards, it was just us. My mum, if it was in Melbourne, she was obviously included. She's really close to my friends. If it was in Sydney, because we decided to do it somewhere else, then she would be at home, happy in front of the telly, not depressed or anything like that. At least my kids are having a great time. I'm cool. I peaked last night, watching carols by candlelight. I'm good. And so, yeah, we redefined Christmas and all of us would make different things and we'd have a feast and oysters were bought and different toppings were put on oysters and lamb was cooked or turkey or whatever it was that we were cooking and a million salads and desserts. And suddenly there'd be a banquet, of edible, delicious
and people.
Food and people that knew me, that I knew that there was no hiding. We all knew that it was a complicated day and that we had each other and we would get through that way.